She's not your real family." The words floated across the porch like a cold draft, slipping under my sweater and chilling me from the inside out. I had been sitting in the rocking chair of the mountain cabin, watching my 8-year-old grandson Logan line up pine cones on the deck rail. His small hands were careful, deliberate, the way children are when they've decided a task matters. Then came the voice, sharp, confident, with the faintest edge of amusement. Renee, my daughter-in-law, stood in the doorway, one manicured hand gripping her coffee mug, the other planted firmly on her hip. "What do you mean, Mom?" Logan asked, his brow wrinkling as if he had just been told the sky was green. "I mean," she said with that condescending smile I knew too well, "she's just your father's mother, not really family like us. She's here because, well, we have to take care of her." The casual cruelty was almost artful. I waited for the old familiar sting, for the quick burn behind my eyes, but instead a strange, unexpected warmth rose in my chest. Relief, not because the words were kind, they were a blade meant to cut deep, but because they confirmed what I had suspected for 3 years. The final piece had fallen into place. The test I had been running was about to end. "Grandma, are you okay?" Logan asked, abandoning his pine cones and running over. I pulled him onto my lap, feeling his small arms wrap around my neck. "I'm fine, sweetheart." My voice was steady, even warm. "You're my real grandson, and that's what matters." From the corner of my eye, I caught Renee rolling her eyes. The gesture was as practiced as her perfect hair. "Logan," she called, "come wash up for dinner, and don't get those clothes dirty sitting on that old chair." The old chair. The one I'd been relegated to while she and Caleb, my son, enjoyed the master suite, and Logan had his own room. I was sleeping on a fold-out couch with a thin mattress that sagged in the middle. I hadn't complained. Complaints only gave Renee more fuel. Logan slid off my lap and went inside, dragging his feet in protest. I stayed on the porch, watching the lake beyond the pines. The evening air carried the smell of wet earth and cedar. I reached into my pocket and felt my phone buzz. A text from Martin Hale, my attorney. "All documents are ready, waiting for your signal." I typed back, "Tomorrow, at dinner." 3 years of quiet observation were about to pay off. Renee thought she'd reduced me to an obligation. Caleb thought I had nowhere else to go. By this time tomorrow, they'd both know exactly who I was, and who I had been all along. 2 winters ago, the week after Owen's funeral, Caleb and Renee came to my small house in Port Townsend. The snow had fallen heavy that year, draping the cedars in white and muffling every sound. I remember thinking how strange it was to host them in such quiet when my heart felt so loud. Caleb sat at my kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a mug he hadn't touched. Renee perched beside him, already in presentation mode. I didn't know yet that I was about to watch the first act of a very long play. "Mom," Caleb began, his voice gentle, as if I were a fragile vase he was afraid to knock over. "We've been talking about your situation." "My situation?" "Your financial situation," Renee cut in, her tone brisk. "Owen didn't leave much, and you can't afford to keep this place. It's too much house for one person." I glanced around at the home we had built together over 40 years, the creak in the floor near the pantry, the carved banister Owen had sanded smooth with his own hands. "What would you suggest?" I asked quietly. "We found a senior community in Tacoma," Caleb said. "Affordable, safe, you could make friends your own age." Translation: far enough that visits would be rare, close enough to check a box of family duty. "And the house?" I asked. "You could sell it," Renee said smoothly. "Use the money for living expenses, no more worry." That's when I knew, not about the plan, that much was obvious, but about the people sitting across from me. My son, the boy I'd once rocked through fevered nights, was speaking as if I were an entry on a budget spreadsheet. His wife was looking at me, as if I were a problem to solve, not a mother to cherish. They thought I had nothing. They thought they were rescuing me from financial ruin. What they didn't know was that for decades, Owen and I had lived far below our means. He had his boat repair shop. I had my small import business, and together we'd invested quietly, steadily, real estate along the coast, municipal bonds, index funds. By the time he died, our portfolio was already worth over $40 million. And that wasn't counting the 3 coastal cottages we rented out under a holding company, or the offshore account my mother had left me when she passed, untouched and still growing. I could have told them the truth that day, but I didn't. Instead, I agreed to sell the house, publicly, and moved into a duplex I already owned, under a different name. I let them believe I was renting. I let them believe I was barely getting by. And then I began to watch. I kept a notebook in the top drawer of my nightstand. Dates, quotes, small observations. Times they forgot to invite me. Moments when Logan parroted words he'd clearly heard from his parents. Every omission, every sideways comment, every choice that told me exactly where I stood. I wasn't angry then, not yet. I was patient. I was building a record, because someday I would need proof, not for me, but for Logan, that love measured in dollars isn't love at all. Back in the present, the smell of pine needles and damp earth drifted into the cabin as morning settled over Lake Crescent. I rose from the fold-out couch, my back stiff from another night on its thin, sagging mattress. Caleb and Renee were still in the master bedroom, the door shut tight. Logan was the only one awake, sitting cross-legged on the rug, carefully lining up his toy cars. By mid-morning, Renee announced we were hiking the Storm King Trail. She spoke as if I might decline, her tone layered with the faint suggestion that I wasn't up to it. I smiled. I'd love to. On the trail, I kept pace with Caleb, without needing to stop for breath. For years, I had pretended to lag behind, to lean on a walking stick, to give them the image of a woman who couldn't keep up. Today, I walked strong and steady, my boots gripping the dirt path. Logan noticed. "Nana, you're walking really fast," he said, hurrying to match my stride. "I feel good today," I told him, squeezing his small hand. "Sometimes we surprise ourselves." Caleb glanced back at me, faint confusion crossing his face. Renee stayed ahead, her camera out, stopping only to take photos with her and Caleb in the frame. Not once did she ask if I wanted to be in a picture. When we reached the overlook, Logan ran to the edge of the viewing platform, pointing at the sparkling water far below. I leaned on the railing beside him, soaking in the view. Behind us, Renee was already posting photos to social media. "Nana," Logan said softly, "Mom says maybe we can't come visit you much anymore because gas is so expensive." The words stung in a way Renee's didn't. They were honest, unfiltered, and innocent. "I see," I said, keeping my tone light for his sake. "Well, we'll see how things work out." But inside, my decision hardened. This was no longer just about testing. It was about reclaiming the truth for my grandson's sake. When we returned to the cabin, I waited until I was alone in the small guest bathroom before pulling my phone from my pocket. I opened my investment app. The numbers blinked back at me. $52,000, up nearly $2 million since last quarter, thanks to a strong run in my coastal rental bookings and the growth in my index funds. I took a slow, steady breath, then typed a short message to Martin Hale. "Tomorrow night, during dinner, have everything ready." His reply came almost instantly. "Understood. Courier will arrive by 5 p.m. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and stepped out into the hallway, my face calm. Renee was at the stove reheating soup from a can. Caleb on the couch, scrolling through his phone. They had no idea that the ground beneath them had already begun to shift. The next morning, a subtle change in the air seemed to follow me. I moved through the cramped cabin kitchen with a kind of quiet energy I hadn't bothered to hide. Renee noticed. She leaned against the doorway, her coffee steaming, eyes narrowing. "You seem chipper today," she said. "I slept well," I replied, which was true in a way. The lumpy fold-out had felt like a feather bed compared to the weight I'd carried for the past 3 years. Knowing the performance was about to end lightened me more than rest ever could. We set out for a short walk to the lake. I kept my stride brisk, my footing sure, letting the pretense of frailty fall away. Renee tried to mask her surprise, but I caught the quick flicker of it on her face. On the shore, she fussed over the picnic blanket, arranging it just so, then posed Caleb for photos. Logan wandered toward the water with me. We crouched to watch minnows dart in the shallows. He whispered, "Nana, next time we come, can we bring the little boat?" I smiled, imagining the cedar canoe hanging in my Whidbey Island garage, a place they didn't yet know existed. "We'll see, sweetheart. We just might." As the afternoon waned, I made my move. "I'd like to cook dinner tonight," I said, brushing sand from my jeans. Caleb glanced up from his phone. "We were going to order pizza. It's easier." "I insist," I replied, my tone light but firm. "It's our last evening here. A proper family meal seems right." Renee hesitated, the muscles in her gittle working. "The kitchen's tiny, not really suited for elaborate cooking." "I'll manage." I'm more resourceful than people think. The walk back to the cabin felt different, like each step was tightening a string that would snap with one well-placed note. When we arrived, I excused myself to the small market in town. There, I selected ribeye steaks marbled like fine lace, fingerling potatoes, fresh rosemary, and a bottle of Cabernet that breathed of dark cherries and cedar. Back at the cabin, I pressed a clean tablecloth and laid out the cutlery, as if for a small holiday. Caleb noticed. "Haven't seen you do this in years," he murmured. "I haven't had the occasion," I said. At 4:55, a knock at the door. A courier in a navy jacket handed me a thick manila envelope, my name written in Martin's precise script. I signed, thanked him, and set it on the sideboard. Renee's gaze lingered on it. "What's that?" "Something for after dinner," I said, smoothing the tablecloth. "First, we eat." The steaks sizzled in the cast-iron pan, their aroma filling the cabin with a richness that made Caleb drift into the kitchen more than once, under the pretense of checking on things. Logan set the table with quiet pride, carefully placing the forks just as I showed him. When I carried the platters out, the room went still. Thick cuts of ribeye glistened beside roasted potatoes and carrots draped in fresh rosemary. The deep garnet of the Cabernet caught the lamplight like a ruby. Caleb's brows lifted. "Wow, Mom, this looks amazing." "It smells expensive," Renee said, half laughing, half probing. "Sometimes you find good things on sale," I replied, sliding into my chair. We began eating. Caleb cut into his steak, eyes widening at the tenderness. Logan took a bite and hummed with pleasure. Even Renee, despite herself, nodded at the flavor. After a few moments, I set down my fork. "I think it's time we talked about a misunderstanding." Caleb looked up. "What kind of misunderstanding?" "About money and respect, and how those two can become dangerously confused." Renee's hand froze over her wine glass. "What is this about?" "For the past 3 years," I began, "you've both been operating under an assumption that after Owen died, I had nothing, that I needed help to keep going, that I should be managed." "That's not," Caleb started. I raised my hand. "Please, let me finish." I reached for the manila envelope and slid my tablet out from inside. With a few taps, the screen filled with a summary page. Account balances, property holdings, trust details. "This is my real financial situation." Caleb's fork clattered against his plate. Renee leaned forward, her face draining of color, as her eyes traced the numbers. 52,000 in total net worth, diversified across coastal properties, municipal bonds, international index funds. This can't be real," she whispered. "It's all real," I said evenly. "The cottages you've never visited, the rentals you've never asked about, the business you've never shown interest in, all real." Caleb stared at me, his voice low. You let us think you were broke. I let you show me who you really were when you thought I had nothing to offer but need." Renee's mouth tightened. "That's manipulative." "What's manipulative?" I countered. "Is telling my grandson I'm not real family. Or making me sleep on a fold-out couch while a guest room stays empty." or teaching a child that love is conditional on what someone can give you. Renee's lips parted, but no words came out. I went on. I kept a record, dates, quotes, choices you made. You excluded me from photos, from holidays, from everyday moments with Logan. You reduced me to an obligation you could set aside whenever convenient. That's not fair, Caleb said, though the conviction in his voice was thin. It's not fair, I agreed, but it's true. Silence stretched, filled only by the faint tick of the wall clock and the distant whisper of wind through the pines. Logan looked between us, confusion clouding his young face. Are you mad at Mom? He asked softly. I reached for his hand. I'm disappointed in how some people have acted, but I will always love you, Logan. Renee shifted in her seat, the color returning to her cheeks in blotchy patches. So what now? You just throw this in our faces and… No, I said. I lay the truth on the table, just like this dinner, and then we decide what kind of family we really are. I took a sip of wine, letting the moment settle. Caleb leaned back slowly, eyes fixed on the tablet screen, as if staring at it long enough might change the numbers. But the truth, like a well-cooked steak, doesn't get undone once it's finished. I let the silence breathe for a moment longer, then slid the manila envelope back toward me. Inside here, I said, is the rest of what you need to know. Caleb watched as I pulled out a set of neatly bound legal documents, the embossed seals catching the lamplight. This, I continued, tapping the top page, is my revised will. Everything I own, every account, every property, every share, will be placed into a trust for Logan until his 25th birthday. Caleb's brows drew together. A trust? Yes, managed by professional trustees. Neither of you will have direct access. Renee's chair scraped slightly on the floor. So you're cutting us out completely? I'm ensuring that Logan's future doesn't depend on your financial planning. Or your character, I said, my voice calm, but unyielding. If you choose to poison him against me, block his visits, or diminish my role in his life, the entire trust reverts to a maritime scholarship foundation. Permanently. Renee stared at me, her breathing uneven. You can't. I can, I said, meeting her eyes. And I have. I set the next document on the table. This is an education and welfare fund for Logan. Tuition, medical expenses, enrichment programs, paid directly by the fund administrators. No reimbursement, no cash withdrawals by you. Caleb rubbed his temples. Mom, this feels like blackmail. This, I replied, is accountability. For 3 years you operated as if I had no power, no resources, and no choice but to accept whatever scraps of family you offered me. Those days are over. I placed the final document before them. Effective immediately, I'm moving. The duplex you thought I rented was always mine. I've sold it and purchased a cedar bungalow on Whidbey Island, 2 hours away. Close enough for visits that matter, far enough to ensure my independence. 2 hours? Caleb repeated, his voice tight. That's far enough that if you want to see me, it will require effort. No more obligatory dinners where I'm treated like an unwelcome guest. No more vacations where I'm given the couch while the guest room stays pristine. If you want me there, you will ask with respect. Otherwise, I'll spend my time elsewhere. Renee crossed her arms, her voice sharpening. And what if we don't agree to your terms? I took a slow sip of wine before answering. Then Logan will still inherit everything at 25, but you will spend nearly 2 decades explaining to him why your treatment of his grandmother cost your family $52 million. The weight of that figure hung between us like a stone suspended by a single fraying rope. Caleb glanced at Renee, and for once, she had no quick retort. This isn't about punishment, I said quietly. It's about making sure the lessons he learns about family are the right ones. And right now, those lessons have been dangerously wrong. Logan's voice carried from the other room. Nana, are we having dessert? I smiled. Yes, sweetheart. Chocolate cake. But first the adults need to finish their conversation. I woke to the faint creak of the porch boards and the smell of coffee. For a moment, I thought I was back in my own kitchen. But then the stiffness in my spine reminded me of the fold-out couch. Pulling on my sweater, I stepped outside. Caleb was sitting on the porch railing, a mug in his hands, his eyes fixed on the mist curling off the lake. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. "Morning," I said. He turned, his expression unreadable. "Mom, can we talk?" I settled into the rocking chair, waiting. We've decided to accept your terms," he said, his voice low. "All of them." I studied his face. The words were there, but the weight behind them mattered more. "You've decided," I repeated. "But do you understand?" He exhaled slowly, the breath visible in the crisp morning air. "I understand that I failed you, as a son, as a father." The admission landed heavier than I'd expected. I thought I'd feel vindicated, but what I felt was something closer to grief for the years already lost. "You failed yourself too," I said gently. "You let someone else's comfort matter more than what was right. You stood by while my place in Logan's life was diminished." He nodded, his jaw tight. I told myself I was keeping the peace. "Peace built on silence isn't peace," I said. "It's surrender." From inside, I could hear the muffled sound of Logan playing with his cars, his voice bright and untroubled. It reminded me why I'd done all this. "Renee's not happy," Caleb admitted. "I didn't expect her to be. She feels like you've boxed us in." "Not boxed in," I corrected. "Given boundaries. Boundaries you should have set for yourselves." He looked down into his coffee, then back at me. "What do we do now?" "You prove it," I said, not with apologies or gifts, but with consistent respect, invitations without conditions, no more erasing me from family events. And if Renee makes a cutting remark, you don't let it slide because it's easier. You correct it, every time. Caleb swallowed hard. "And if we don't? Then you'll have your answer about who you really are, and Logan will know it too." We sat in silence, the lake before us calm and glassy. Finally, he stood. "We'll see you in 2 weeks? 10 o'clock sharp," I said. "Punctuality is respect." As he went inside, I stayed in the rocking chair, the morning air cool against my face. The choice was theirs now, but for the first time in years, so was the power. 6 months later, the cedar bungalow on Whidbey Island smelled faintly of sawdust and rosemary. Logan knelt beside me in the garden bed we'd built together, pressing marigold seeds into the soil with careful fingers. The spring air was cool, salted by the sea breeze that rolled in from the bluff beyond the house. Every other Saturday, Caleb pulled into my driveway at exactly 10 o'clock. Sometimes Renee came. More often, she stayed behind, her polite distance becoming our unspoken truce. When she did visit, she was measured. No barbs, no sideways comments. I didn't expect warmth, but the absence of hostility was its own kind of peace. Logan thrived in this space. He'd learned to sand cedar boards in my workshop, coil rope on the dock, and bake a blueberry cobbler from scratch. Here, he asked questions he never had before. That afternoon, as we rinsed the dirt from our hands, he looked up at me. "Mom says you're really rich. Is that true?" I smiled, crouching so we were eye level. "It is." He thought about this for a moment. "Does that make you different?" "No," I said. "Money doesn't change who you are, but it can show you who other people really are." He nodded slowly, then grinned. "Can I still come here every other weekend?" "Always," I said. "That's not about money. That's about love. And love is something you earn and keep by showing up." Later, Caleb came out to the garden. He didn't interrupt. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, watching us tuck the last seedlings into the earth. There was a quiet between us now that didn't feel strained. As the sun dipped toward the water, I stood on the porch with a cup of tea. The sea below shifted in the changing light, calm and certain. I thought about the notebook I'd kept for 3 years, each entry a record of small betrayals. I'd burned it in the fire pit the day I moved in here, letting the ash drift out over the waves. Dignity, I'd learned, isn't given. It's something you hold on to when others try to take it. Wealth is only a tool. The real inheritance is teaching a child and reminding yourself that family is proven by presence, respect, And truth told in time, the test was over, and I had my answer.